Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining the webinar. My name is Hank Rosen, and I'm a policy analyst here at the Council of State Governments Justice Center. Before beginning the webinar, I'd like to briefly talk through a couple of house-cleaning items and how the webinar is going to work, and then take a quick moment to tell you a bit about the National Reentry Resource Center. Anytime during this webinar, you can ask a question by typing it into the QA panel at the bottom right-hand portion of your screen. We will keep a running list of content-related questions that we receive, and then respond to those during the final segment of the webinar. We'll do our best to get through as many questions as possible. If you encounter technical or audio problems during this webinar, please call WebEx technical support at 1-866-229-3239. There are some technical issues that we may not be able to resolve, which we apologize for in advance, but for that reason, we will be recording this event and we'll post it on our website at csgjusticeCenter.org/NRRC. This should be posted about a week from now. And once it has been posted, we will email all the participants a copy of the recording. So with that, again, welcome. The National Reentry Resource Center, established by the Second Chance Act and administered by the Bureau of Justice Assistance, U.S. Department of Justice, provides education, training, and technical assistance to states, tribes, territories, local governments, service providers, nonprofit organizations, and corrections institutions working on prisoner reentry. It's a project of the Council of State Governments Justice Center with key project partners including the Urban Institute, Association of State Correctional Administrators, and the American Probation and Parole Association. The center is also guided by an advisory board, which helps coordinate and support services for Second Chance Act grantees and the reentry field at large. Its overall mission is to advance the reentry field through knowledge transfer and dissemination and to promote evidence-based practices. This slide provides just a quick snapshot of our Resource Center's homepage. We are constantly adding new content and resources to our website, and we send out a monthly newsletter that provides information about the latest research, funding opportunities, distance learning events like this webinar, and other news about reentry. We encourage you to sign up for our newsletter and other announcements, so please visit csgjusticecenter.org/NRRC after today's webinar, and feel free to click the subscribe button in the top right-hand corner. I want to thank everyone again for joining this webinar. This is a project that myself and Dr. Nancy Levine from the Urban Institute and her colleagues have been working very hard on. We're very pleased to announce that we have expanded the site to include a few new sections, and we'll be talking about those today. First, I wanted to speak a bit about our presenters. Joining us today is Dr. Nancy Levine, the Director of the Justice Policy Center at the Urban Institute. Dr. Levine is the Director of the Justice Policy Center at the Urban Institute, where she leads a staff of over 35 researchers and oversees a research portfolio of more than 36 active projects spanning a wide array of crime, justice, and public safety topics. Before being appointed as Director in 2009, Dr. Levine served for 8 years as a Senior Research Associate at the Urban Institute, directing projects on prisoner reentry, crime prevention, policing, and the evaluation of criminal justice technologies. Prior to joining the Urban Institute, Dr. Levine was the founding director of the Crime Mapping Research Center, since renamed the Mapping and Analysis for Public Safety Program, at the National Institute of Justice, the research technology and evaluation arm of the U.S. DOJ. She later served as a special assistant to the Assistant Attorney General for the Office of Justice Programs within the DOJ. She held positions as Research Director for the Texas Sentencing Commission, Research Fellow at the Police Executive Research Forum, and Consultant to the National Council on Crime and Delinquency. Her research interests focus on criminal justice evaluation, prisoner reentry, policing, crime prevention, and the spatial analysis of crime and criminal behavior. She has published widely on these topics, appearing in a variety of scholarly journals and practitioner publications. She holds a BA from Smith College, an MA in Public Affairs from the Lyndon B. Johnson School of Public Affairs at the University of Texas, Austin, and a PhD from the School of Criminal Justice at Rutgers, the State University of New Jersey. And we're very proud to call her one of our colleagues on this project. I myself am Hank Rosen. I'm a policy analyst here at the Council of State Governments Justice Center, where my primary responsibilities are to the reentry program and therefore the National Reentry Resource Center. I provide training and technical assistance to an array of Second Chance Act grantees as well as manage the development and implementation of the What Works in Reentry Clearinghouse project, as well as the Reentry and Employment project, and provide support to different projects and cross-agency initiatives. So with that, I'm going to quickly walk through the goals of today's presentation. We're going to start with a quick overview of the purpose of the What Works in Reentry Clearinghouse, talk a bit about its background and why we've initiated this effort. The second part of today's presentation is to discuss the characteristics of the What Works in Reentry Clearinghouse. This includes a discussion on the methodology and how we identified and synthesized research to include on the site, as well as a tour of the site, so how all that work is translated into a usable tool for folks in the field. And then Dr. Levine is going to discuss key findings from the newest sections that are available today. And then I'm going to talk a bit about using the What Works in Reentry Clearinghouse. The first thing that we're talking about today is the purpose of the What Works in Reentry Clearinghouse. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Levine.
Thank you so much, Hank. It's a pleasure to be doing this webinar with you, and I just want to acknowledge that you are a great partner, and it's been a delight to work with the Council of State Governments on this project. I'm also thrilled that there are so many attendees on this webinar today. I hope that all of you are listening intently and will ask questions and will follow up with all of us if you have any further questions after this webinar, because our goal is to serve you, to serve the field, and that is the ultimate purpose of the What Works in Reentry Clearinghouse. And when we first partnered with the Council of State Governments on their National Reentry Resource Center, we noted a major gap in the field, and it goes something like this. I mean, there were some people who said that why should we even invest in prisoner reentry programs? We don't even know what works. We don't even know if it works. My response to that was, that is not true. It's actually false. The problem is the knowledge does not exist in one place, and the knowledge is largely inaccessible. There are countless journal articles on all aspects of prisoner reentry type programs and treatment and evaluation, and it's really hard to decipher. It's very difficult for the average person to assess whether the evaluations meet a certain level of rigor, so that we know that the ultimate outcome of the research is reliable. And that makes it very difficult to know what is relevant in the field. What should policymakers and practitioners be looking to for best practice? So this is just an example of how indecipherable some of the technical research reports and the journal articles can be. I don't know if I should be ashamed of this, but this is actually one of Urban Institute's reports. It wasn't meant to be for a practitioner audience. It was meant to be for more of a researcher audience, but I think the average person would look at that and say, wow, that's kind of nice artwork. I might want to put that in my living room, but I have no idea what it really means. So that was one of our goals, was to decipher all of that for you. Just moving on a bit to the characteristics of the clearinghouse, I wanted to talk a bit about how we went about identifying studies and deciding which ones to include and which ones, and how to present that information. So in terms of methodology, we only looked for studies that were quantitative, that had actual numbers and statistics associated with them. I want to be clear right now that we highly value qualitative research and qualitative evaluations. They serve an important purpose, and in fact, they serve a purpose in the clearinghouse in that they are referenced and used to provide context behind the quantitative findings, and in particular when we're looking at issues of implementation quality. We also restricted the clearinghouse to studies that are looking at people returning from some form of criminal justice incarceration. And one thing that's important to note is that studies had to look at post-release outcomes. So, for example, there are many studies that look at how participation in certain types of in-prison programs affect in-prison outcomes like disciplinary records. If they only look at those, then we would not include those in our study because we're interested in reentry outcomes, what happens to folks on the outside. We also confined our search to articles published in 1980 or more recently. And then in terms of our methodology, we looked at studies that were either randomized controlled trial experiments with treatment and control groups or quasi-experimental designs that in some way, shape, or form created matched groups with either statistical controls or other statistical methods. Our threshold for sample size was pretty generous, at least 30 participants in each group. And one thing that we felt strongly about is that we would not include studies that were conducted by the same people who developed the program because they would have a vested interest in the outcome of those studies unless those studies were published in a peer-reviewed journal. There is a much longer list of ineligible studies than there is of eligible ones. I'll explain a little bit more about how that panned out in a moment, but it's important for you all to know that all the studies that we reviewed are available on our website, including the ineligible ones. So this is just, you'll see more of this later. Hank will walk you through this in more detail, but this just tells you a little bit about how we applied our methodology to a rating system that looks at two types of ratings. One is, what did the study actually find? Did it find an evidence of an effect, be it positive or negative, and how strong was that evidence? And then a measure of rigor, which is how much can we trust the findings? How rigorous were the studies? And what's important for you to understand is that the rigor rating is really about the evaluation. It does not rate the program itself. That is a rating that is not included in any kind of empirical or numeric way in the What Works in Reentry Clearinghouse, largely because so few studies really attend to implementation quality or fidelity as it's known in the research community. So this just gives you a sense. Hank, am I in your territory yet?
Not yet. Nope, you're
Not
good.
yet. Okay. Oh, I'm on 13. Okay. I tend to do that. I just talk and I don't stop. Since we're not in the same room, you have no way of controlling me. So I think I have the slides 13 through 18. So this is just an example of how the content is organized within the clearinghouse. So if you think about the wide array of reentry studies that would be out there, I mean, reentry is a huge category because it includes substance abuse treatment, it includes mental health treatment, it includes housing programs, it includes a whole host of employment programs. There's so many different components to reentry programs, and each one of those has its own category of evaluations, and this just gives you a sense of how we organize them, hierarchically, starting with all manner of substance abuse treatment programs, and then dividing them up according to specific types of programs or named programs, some of which will only have one evaluation and some have multiple evaluations. These are the topics that are currently in the clearinghouse: employment, housing, mental health, and something we call brand name programs, which are programs that tend to be holistic in nature and pretty well known to the field. And then we'll be sharing a little bit about some new content that we've added, which is primarily substance abuse treatment with some family-based programs thrown in. And then you can see that we still have quite a bit of work cut out for us, covering topics such as education, sex offender treatment, and juvenile justice, among others. So, Hank,
this is me. Yep.
Yeah, okay.
Yep. thank you, Dr. Levine, for giving us that overview. So as you can tell, we're sort of faced with this massive challenge of really trying to sort of understand what it is we know about effective reentry practice and what it is that we don't know about effective reentry practice. And the Urban Institute has sort of applied a very rigorous and meticulous and methodical methodology to going through the research and sort of picking out the key findings that are most effective to, or most sort of important and informative to different audiences. And on our end, it was the job of the Justice Center and National Reentry Resource Center to support the work that they did and find a way to package that in a way that makes sense for an online compendium of resources. And so what we have in front of us is the actual translation of all that hard work, the What Works in Reentry Clearinghouse. This is the home page. Essentially, there are three primary ways to access information on the site. You can browse the focus areas, so those sort of broader disciplines within the reentry field that Dr. Levine mentioned earlier. Those are the focus areas, and you can begin to sort of drill down. You can perform an advanced search and search for sort of very particular types of programs or interventions or programs that work for particular target populations. And then one thing that we have is an About section that provides tips and helps on how to use the site, deeper sort of explanation of the methodology. Dr. Levine sort of spoke quickly about the primary considerations for how we determine if a study is relevant to sort of the task we have at hand, and then whether it's sort of a high quality study that should be included in the site. And we walk through the different levels that a study goes through in our About section. And then finally, we provide additional help and information for people who are unfamiliar to research or are generally interested in learning about research in the reentry field. We have a frequently asked questions section and then a list of key terms and definitions to reduce the amount of researcher or policymaker jargon that might exist inherently in the site. So with that, I'd like to take a moment to walk through the site and provide examples of how someone might gain access to key information. Seen as substance abuse treatment focus areas, one of our newest additions and perhaps one of the largest additions to the site. I think we'll go ahead and start there. And I think a common thing that people hear in the field is that substance abuse treatment is important for reentry. Folks working in the field know that they come across folks that have special substance abuse needs, and that's vital to their successful transition. But what they may not have are the tools and sort of deeper understanding of what programs are currently out there and what they're doing to have an impact on substance abuse outcomes. So if you were to click on that page, that would take you to sort of that top level of information about sort of broader implications of substance abuse treatment in the reentry field. On the substance abuse focus area page, this is the substance abuse focus area page. This is where we provide sort of a synthesis of the research. One thing that I do want to note, though, is on this page, if you're ever unsure about what you're looking at, we do have a link to the About section, which provides all that information, and then we link off to other pages that also include additional resources. So if you realize you're not looking for literature, maybe you're looking for some of those more qualitative studies in nature or policy piece, we link to some key resources in this field. And if you're hoping to do an advanced search, you can search from each of the pages. And then the key that Dr. Levine had alluded to earlier is also included on every page. So that way, whenever we present a piece of research and there's some discussion on the implications of that research, there's a quick and easy way to understand whether or not it had a positive impact or a negative impact, or if that study was considered being categorized at a high rigor, so a very high quality study, or the basic rigor. And basic rigor studies for our site are still held at a very high standard. It's just sort of not the absolute top of the top. So on this page, the intro section provides sort of an overview of the focus area. What is substance abuse programming? Why is it important to reentry? and sort of what are some key themes in the field. We also provide a general summary of findings. This is where we synthesize all of the research that we've gone through and provide some of those major takeaways from all of this. And then we also provide a list of all the interventions that fell under this substance abuse program focus area. Again, that provides sort of a preview of all of the different things that encompass the larger substance abuse treatment field. If you scroll down on the substance abuse page, you get a list of each of those interventions, and these are called the intervention note cards. Each of these note cards provides a short description of the intervention and a quick overview of the evaluation findings. So as you can see, if you were to hover your mouse over one of those findings, a little message would pop up and tell you exactly what that means. So for in-jail substance abuse treatment programs, there was one evaluation of the basic rigor, and there was a modest evidence of effectiveness. If you are running a jail program and you have funds to offer, institutional substance abuse treatment, this might be something that you're interested in. Given that it was implemented in 5 different areas, it was voluntary, it had sort of a complex approach, and it was located in California and New York, you might be someone who says, yes, this applies to me, I'd like to learn more about this particular intervention and what research says about these particular kinds of substance abuse programs. So if you click on the View Intervention Details button, which I've highlighted, that officially takes you down to the next level where you get to learn more information about those specific interventions. This is what an intervention page looks like. When you click on the intervention note card, you immediately see sort of a table of findings. So for all of the evaluations or programs that were evaluated within this particular intervention area, you can see how they measured out against recidivism, employment, substance abuse, or any other measures. We also include a ratings key and a search box in case you're interested in learning more. On this page, we provide a summary of key findings from all of the programs that were evaluated in this area, as well as a description of what that particular intervention is and sort of common program designs. One thing that I think is particularly interesting and helpful to the field is that anytime researchers at the Urban Institute uncovered a recommendation for practice, if a study differentiated between what was effective and ineffective for practitioners in implementing a program, they would pull that from the literature and include this in the intervention area summary. Similarly, they did this for researchers. We have a broad audience for this site, and so anytime there was a recommendation for researchers, this was pulled out and provided. If you scroll down on this page, much like you did on the home page, you'd see a list of the evaluations of the actual studies of programs that make up this intervention area. So again, these are sort of the foundation of the backbone of the site. These are all the actual studies that provide sort of the primary resource of information that's included in each of the different levels of synthesis. And these evaluation cards provide an abbreviated summary of the program, as well as a discussion on the target population and then the rating that this particular study received. So if someone was interested in a particular program and they saw, as what we're looking at now, that the drug abuse treatment program for males specifically had a modest evidence of effectiveness and has been implemented sort of in a variety of different settings, that might be a good fit for a jurisdiction looking to implement a specific treatment program that's voluntary in nature and residential. If you click on the title bar of that evaluation note card, it opens up to provide additional information. You get an expanded summary of the program, more detail on the target population. You also get to learn about the evaluation design. So why was this a high rigor study versus a basic rigor study? What were some of the core findings? What did the researchers observe that was effective or ineffective? What are some of the limitations of the study? And then again, what are the sample sizes? If you are interested in learning even more and really driving into what those sort of studies of programs say, you can click again on View Evaluation Details, and that takes you down to the final level where we summarize the core findings from each study. So we provide the program summary as available, discussion on the outcomes, deeper discussion on the study population, discussion on the methodology of the study, and something that I think is very important is a list of the publications that we reviewed in coming up with those findings and discussion on the program. Given that there's some sort of legal and copyright reasons that prevent us from sharing everything that we've uncovered, as many of you know, academic journals often charge a subscription fee, and we don't have the right to share everything. But we attempt to make sure that you, the audience, has access to the latest research, and so we provide the latest and most accessible citation for a particular study. So in addition to sort of this top-down approach of exploring the content on the site, if you are particularly interested in a special kind of reentry program, you know what focus area you're looking at or you're interested in, if you know a particular population that you're interested in, and you're looking for something in a particular jurisdiction or setting, we offer an advanced search function, and so you can enter sort of the keywords and apply filters, and it will pull that information for you. As we begin to increase the number of studies and evaluations included on the site, we also increase the number of different filters you can apply to a search, hopefully maximizing your ability to quickly access research. I'm sort of cognizant or aware of the fact that not everyone can drill down every time, but the advanced search is hopefully a tool that folks can use to sort of pull up something that they are particularly interested in. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Levine, who's going to talk a bit about the key findings from the newest sections.
Thank you, Hank. I know that was a lot to digest. I hope that all the attendees will, if they haven't already, get on the website and start just playing around with it to get a better sense of how it works and all the rich content that is within it. Probably more than you even needed, but everything is there, well documented, and in great detail. We thought it would be helpful for two reasons to focus on some of our new content. One, we expect you're interested in our findings, and two, it gives you a good sense of the process that we go through in winnowing down all of the evaluation research into only those studies that meet a certain threshold of rigor, and then how we go about synthesizing those findings. So in the area of substance abuse studies, we reviewed 415 evaluation publications, which is obviously a large volume of research. Some of it, frankly, more accessible than others. They broke down into these general categories. Therapeutic communities is perhaps the largest category of all. There was a substantial body of research on case management and service referrals around substance abuse issues. Of course, inpatient treatment, outpatient treatment, and then some of these types of unique programs that we often term brand name programs. So therapeutic communities, even though we had all that large volume of data, as I explained earlier, even though if you look here across all the substance abuse categories, 415 publications, as you may recall, many are ineligible because they weren't looking at reentry outcomes. Others were ineligible because they didn't meet certain thresholds of rigor. Ultimately, for therapeutic communities, we identified 16 studies that were indeed eligible. Not quite a 50-50 split between basic and high rigor in terms of the quality of the evaluation methodology. And nearly all of them focused on recidivism outcomes. And this just gives you a summary of what those findings were, with 7 finding a strong evidence of a positive effect. In other words, that participation in therapeutic communities reduced recidivism rates as compared to similar situated people who did not participate in therapeutic communities. There was a fair amount, 5, that found no effect in any direction, whether positive or negative. This is the other outcome that some but not all of the therapeutic community studies looked at, and that is actual effect on substance use, which you would expect to see in studies of this kind. And here we found that the vast majority, 75%, found evidence of an effect in that participants who went through therapeutic communities were less likely to engage in illegal substance use on the outside, and roughly split between strong and modest evidence of an effect. One thing that was really interesting to look at in this body of knowledge is the difference in impact of therapeutic communities on women versus men. And it turns out that there's enough good research on this topic that we could explore gender-specific effects of therapeutic communities. So some studies tested just the effects of general therapeutic communities on women versus therapeutic communities that were specifically designed for women. And what we found was of those that only looked at standard therapeutic communities with no gender-specific programming, none of them had an effect. And yet all three of the studies that looked at programs designed specifically for women all found beneficial effects. So this is a pretty strong definitive finding across only studies that were discerned to be rigorous enough for inclusion in the clearinghouse. We also looked at other types of substance abuse treatment programs, of which there are many. By and large, they showed a beneficial effect. But one problem that we've noted in both this and other topic areas is that more often than not, only one evaluation is done of any type of program. Now, we understand that evaluations are expensive and they're hard to conduct. But in terms of best practice in the research community, replication is key. So that's one of our non-program findings that we have coming out of the clearinghouse is that not only do we need better research, but we need more replications of existing evaluations. This just gives you a sense of the other types of substance abuse treatment programs that were included in this clearinghouse. And you can go on your own and search across all these studies. They're ranked in terms of evidence, so you'll see we had there was a DWI program serving those in county jail that had a strong evidence of effect on recidivism, programs looking at cognitive behavioral change also found to have a strong effect, a treatment program for parolees in Maryland as well. Others had modest evidence. I'm not going to read through all of these, but I just want you to see that there's several different types of substance abuse treatment programs that were found to have a strong effect on recidivism, and then a few here at the end that had no evidence of an effect. Overall, about two-thirds of the studies we looked at found statistically significant effect on reducing recidivism. I already highlighted the gender-specific findings. And so that's a brief summary of our substance abuse treatment findings. We also added to the clearinghouse quite recently our family category, where we had hoped to have a really large volume of studies in this category. Many got winnowed out because they didn't meet our standards of rigor. They might have been entirely qualitative and certainly not without value, but not relevant for inclusion in the clearinghouse. They may not have looked at post-release outcomes. So, for example, it might have been a program to have families stay in contact with their incarcerated loved ones and then looked at in-prison outcomes, but not post-release outcomes. And then, frankly, a lot of the family studies weren't really as rigorous as we would like to see and didn't meet our threshold of rigor for inclusion. What we were left with were three studies that all had to do with visitation. Two of the studies were your standard visitation programs. So to what extent does family visitation and facilitating family visitation have an impact on post-release outcomes? And then the third, which is the private family visiting program, emphasis on the word private. These were conjugal visits. This is based in a Canadian federal prison. All three of these studies found evidence of an impact on recidivism, and one found strong evidence, not just modest evidence. And so while we lament the fact that there's not a lot of good rigorous research on family-based programming, where I think a lot of us who have researched and worked in the field for years know instinctively that family involvement is critical to reentry success, where it's interesting and frankly comforting to know that those studies that we did find are having the expected impact on recidivism. That said, much more research is needed, but what we do know can help reinforce the importance of family-friendly visitation policies for departments of corrections. So now I'm going to turn it back to Hank, who's going to give you more examples of the various ways that you can use the clearinghouse.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Levine. So I think, hopefully, as everyone has seen, there's a ton of research out there, and, the Urban Institute has really done a great job of identifying reentry programs, services applied in a correctional setting that impact outcomes of someone transitioning back into the community, and hopefully promote public safety, public health, community and family outcomes for that person and sort of the jurisdiction that they're returning to. And we've hopefully sort of synthesized that information, presented it in a way that can be helpful, although at the end of the day, it's still sort of research existing in the context of more research or more policy and more discussion. And so what I had hoped to do was to quickly provide a few examples of how some of our partners have begun to apply the clearinghouse to the work that they're doing, and offer some suggestions to folks today on how they might be able to maximize the usage of this resource. Being armed with the knowledge is one thing, and that's really what we hope to have happen. And then the other thing that we'd like to see is creative ways that this can be applied in the field. Fortunately, it looks like we've got a real diverse array of folks from different agencies and programs and settings joining us today. So hopefully this resonates with many of you. For reentry programs or very specific programs like a substance abuse program, a government agency, perhaps the State Department of Corrections, the Department of Health and Human Services, or an analog at a county level, or a policymaker within one of those agencies, perhaps even an elected official at a state level. The clearinghouse can be used as a tool for improving quality of programs and policies. It offers access to research so that it's at your fingertips and presented in a way that's hopefully easier to understand than the primary source itself. It can be used to expedite the literature review and research that you might have to do for other proposals and reports. So instead of sifting through the 500 pages of analysis on a particular program, hopefully you have 3 pages of synthesis and analysis in front of you that tells you what that particular study says about a given program, and that can be used when applying for grant funding and when making the case to invest in a particular kind of service or program. Hopefully save some folks some hassle and some time, and improve both the quality of the proposals and reports that you're sending to funders or to sort of the higher-ups that are interested in what you're doing. It also provides recommendations on effective programs and practices. So not only can it be used to support what a program is doing, It also provides guidance on what an effective program actually looks like and what effective practices look like, first and foremost, actually. I think we'd love to see more programs sort of borrowing from effective components, and that's where the recommendations for practice come in. In that regard, it can also be used to inform new policies and new strategies to support the implementation of a program. As Nancy pointed out, gender-responsive programs tend to be more effective for female offenders than sort of general programs used with female offenders. So an example of a good policy would be is that a program should adopt special gender-responsive policies and practices for female offenders as opposed to applying a blanket program, and that could also be integrated at a higher level, such as the Department of Corrections can begin to think about how they're applying different practices to, applying different treatments and programs to different populations. And, finally, for a lot of programs that are just starting out, it provides a kind of baseline for comparing outcomes. If you know that a program has sort of demonstrated a really strong impact on recidivism rates, or a really strong impact on employment outcomes for their participants, and you're not achieving those kinds of outcomes or you're surpassing those outcomes, you sort of have a way to understand how you might fit in comparison to an arguably similar program. With the caveat being, of course, and I'm sure Dr. Levine agrees, that you should be comparing apples and oranges here. For TA providers or experts, I guess when I say experts, I mean folks who are, similar to consultants that provide training and guidance and help sort of plan and grow and implement programs, not necessarily the folks who are charged with, actually implementing a program and ensuring quality. The clearinghouse is a tool for improving sort of the quality of services and knowledge base. So again, it's quick and easy access to research that sort of back up any training or work that you're doing around planning a program or policy. It can be used for training, education, again, helpful for grant proposals. If you are putting together a grant proposal with one of your clients, you know that you can go to the clearinghouse and pull from the research there and not have to worry about doing sort of an exhaustive search on Google for research that may or may not be applicable to what you're doing. It can also be used as a tool for engaging stakeholders and other funders. If you're trying to convene a reentry council and someone from another field says we have nothing to do with reentry, we're not interested in partnering, you can sort of point to the body of literature and say, no, in fact, the services you provide are very important to reentry and hopefully engage that population. And again, it can be used sort of as a baseline for sort of understanding what's happening in the field and understanding what your outcomes mean in sort of the larger context of quality research. Finally, for those of you who partner with service providers and programs that provide particular service, the clearinghouse can be used in many ways for funding and funding decisions. If a given service has been shown to not really impact outcomes, or there's not a lot of quality research, you might be more hesitant to explore funding a program that can't demonstrate that it's built on a strong foundation of research. Offering sort of priority consideration to people that have done a literature review is possibly one strategy you can use to enhance the quality of the applicants that you're receiving, in a way to ensure that programs are really attempting to base their project on best available evidence. This isn't to discourage creativity. I think that's something that is definitely encouraged in the field, is creating good programs, but someone who can demonstrate that they've used a strong foundation of research is probably a very good thing for you and your agency. Finally, for those of you who are researchers or academics, again, it's sort of a tool for synthesizing research and identifying gaps in research. In that line, we also provide recommendations for improving research and for identifying new areas of research, and so the clearinghouse can be used as a way to sort of identify those gaps and, again, provide sort of a ready-made synthesis and analysis of what the research says, and can really sort of promote higher quality research being used in the field. We'd love to hear, from other folks about how they're using the site. I'd love to, talk to folks to find out how they'd like to try and use the site and how we might be able to help them, and find ways to sort of track and measure their success and integrating research into their program design. So before we sort of come to a close, I was hoping to answer a few questions for folks. So I have a lengthy list of questions, and I'm going to pick a few. Some of them are very similar. Dr. Levine, I was hoping you might be able to field this one. Is there a particular reason that we don't sort of synthesize the education and employment section and housing section? Or I guess perhaps another way of thinking of it is, why did we choose to sort of disaggregate education and employment as opposed to integrating those two things?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. Well, because we saw them as, related but distinctly different categories, both trying to achieve similar outcomes, but in terms of kind of grouping programs together, we thought it made sense to do it that way. There's no right or wrong per se, but the beauty of the clearinghouse is that regardless of how we group things together, they can always be cross-referenced. So, for example, some programs address both employment readiness as well as educational deficits. We would have those listed in two places, under employment and under education. And if those same programs also attended to housing and addressed substance addiction issues, they would also be cross-referenced under our kind of holistic category, or what I think we're calling case management and generic reentry services category. So, regardless of what went behind our decision about what goes where, the beauty of the web is that you can cross-reference anything as much as you like, and it doesn't really appear redundant to the user because you can search across a wide array of search mechanisms, and it'll pull up the studies of interest.
Yeah, definitely. One thing that we've done and Urban has been helpful with is quote-unquote tagging research as they send it to us that belongs in multiple categories. So again, no matter what sort of the high-level category it fits into, typically defined by sort of the primary objective of the program, it does exist in multiple places, and hopefully as we increase the number of studies that are on the site, those sort of patterns will become clear, and the advanced searches is one great way to sort of distinguish between, a program that's being administered based on a particular kind of service versus a program that's being delivered to a particular population with various different needs. There was a quick question about sort of what we mean when we say service provider, and I think just to sort of get that out of the way, I think that sort of sometimes is language that Dr. Levine and I might use to describe someone that's administering or offering some kind of support to someone returning from incarceration, whether they're providing case management, administering substance abuse treatment, assisting with getting driver's license, someone with sort of a direct interaction with a client who's working with them during their reentry process. So it could be a therapist, a drug treatment counselor, so on and so forth. I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
Or more generally, an organization of service providers, right? So a nonprofit who's, that's dedicated to helping returning prisoners, for example.
Let's see. I've got another one for you, Dr. Levine. In terms of our content-related inclusionary criteria, there seems to be a trend towards including social network or social support outcomes. Do we consider these as potential reentry outcomes?
Yeah, I saw that question. I wasn't entirely clear what the inquirer was referring to. If, for example, let me tell you if this is an answer. So would social networks or social support include measures such as family reunification? If so, and if a study measured that rigorously, absolutely we would include it. In fact, we're not against including any manner of outcomes that have been measured rigorously, but what we've learned is that the standard outcomes are what we normally see, which is recidivism of various forms, be it rearrest, revocation, return to prison, return to jail, reincarceration of some kind, substance abuse or substance use of any kind, measured in a lot of different ways. Could be self-reported, it could be based on drug tests, and in some instances housing, if we're looking at studies that are intended to support housing outcomes, but by and large those look really more at recidivism outcomes. And of course, employment outcomes. So looking at whether or not a job was obtained, how long the job was retained, what the wages were, and so forth. Those are the standard measures that we see in our field.
Great. There's a question about sort of the diversity of research that we include on the site. I think we review primarily journals and publications that have been published in North America, but we don't rule out publications from other countries. I think probably the biggest barrier to reviewing literature from published in other countries is simply whether or not it's published in English language. So we do have the ability to differentiate between publications published in particular states or countries, and we tag those research articles as they're posted. And if any particular country is tagged, it shows up in the searching function. With regard to setting, we also attempt to differentiate between working with suburban populations, urban populations, rural populations, and attempt to provide as much sort of context as necessary in order to effectively interpret the effectiveness of a given program.
Right.
There's a question.
If I can just clarify, though, there's, for example, there's quite a bit of excellent reentry research in Australia that we have not yet included, although we'd like to. So it is right now it's pretty North American biased and predominantly U.S. and Canada, but we're interested in learning from as many experiences and evaluations as we can.
There's been a few questions about timeline for more information. I think sort of, Dr. Levine, the short answer is there's a big push to try and build out the entirety of the site by this time next year. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so expect many more of these. Dr. Levine, this is an interesting question, and it perhaps is the answer is limited according to the availability of research. But will we ever see anything on financial literacy programs in the clearinghouse?
If there's a rigorous evaluation of such a program, we'd gladly include it. One thing that I did want to mention that I don't think we made clear, Hank, is that ironically, the most recent evaluation studies are not included in the clearinghouse because when we set out to do this a few years ago, we culled the literature through, I guess it was 2011 when we started working on it. So in addition to adding new content areas by topic between now and this time next year, we'll also be updating with the very most recent research in the field. And I mention that because that's the kind of thing that you might see in evaluation of lately the field in general is looking towards other types of programs and reentry outcomes. But today I've not seen an evaluation of such a program.
I think that actually sort of taps into another interesting question, which is, do we intend to conduct a meta-analyses of broader program types? I'm imagining, if an intervention area grows such that there are a multitude of multiple programs and multiple evaluations in that area, would we conduct a meta-analysis? And I think there's two things we'd want to point out here. The first is we've not included meta-analyses in the site because they inherently sort of don't fit the model of the other evaluations that we've included, because we're looking at evaluations of sort of discrete programs or interventions, whereas those sort of synthesize across multiple programs. But we do use those meta-analyses in consideration for identifying research that does qualify for the site. And that's actually a really valuable source of information for us. And as I understand, it's not our intention to conduct any sort of formal meta-analyses as a researcher might think of it with the information in the site. We intend to, or hope to, sort of summarize findings and discuss, programs in relation to one another and identify trends and themes of research. For instance, as with the therapeutic communities site, there's a robust amount of research there. The findings lead us to determine that gender-responsive programs are very effective, but I don't know that we would apply sort of the standard meta-analyses process to that literature. I don't know, Dr. Levine, if you want to weigh in. You're certainly more eloquent on these issues than I am.
No, you're doing a very good job, Hank. Just to add to that, meta-analysis, and just for those who don't know what it is, it's taking studies and essentially piecing them together and pooling the data to be able to say something more definitive across a body of knowledge. In our opinion and experience, that tends to work well when all those individual evaluations are of the same type of intervention, very narrowly defined. What we found in the realm of reentry literature is that every program is pretty unique. And so pulling data across disparate programs can lead to findings that may be misleading. And take your example, Hank, of the therapeutic communities. Had we just pulled all the data together, I'm not sure we would have discerned a difference between gender-responsive and generic programs. We would have just treated them all the same.
Yeah, and I think that really sort of speaks to the future of the site once it's updated. As Nancy had mentioned, not only are there content areas to build out, there's a growing list of studies between the end of, or beginning of 2011 and now that need to be incorporated in the site. As that happens, we hope to really extract some of those key findings and develop pithy briefs that we can share with the field that provide recommendations for particular programs or program approaches and practices. So if we're observing, that programs that employed a unique engagement strategy to engage the community or to engage plural supervision, that might be something that we'd want to share with the field at large. But I think it sort of depends on, what that ends up being at the end of the day. Let's see. Got another interesting question. Are there rigor guidelines we can receive to build into our program outcomes? If I'm interpreting this correctly, I think what we're looking for is, are there guidelines, rigor guidelines that can be used to ensure quality of service delivery within a program? I don't know that we necessarily dive deep into quality assurance matters in the site, although I think quality assurance is a big issue for programs that are implementing new strategies and interventions. And my hope is that many of the programs that were evaluated that are included in the site have sort of been up and running for a while, and we provide enough information about how particular programs were administered or services were delivered, such that folks in the field can learn from that and apply it to their program. In many cases, however, researchers aren't quick to describe what that actual program looked like and what guidelines were being used and how they sort of assured quality service delivery. But the benefit of what we've done is pulling all of the citations of where information on a particular program exists is that hopefully you'll be able to track down some of the information about what that program design looked like if it wasn't talked about in detail in the actual publication itself. Again, I think that's something we hope to explore down the road as we're extracting key themes. Is what can we say about program design that will be helpful for folks in quality assurance, and I think it applies not only to policymakers and practitioners and service providers, but also to researchers and sort of academics as well. As what do they need to know about designing a study? What is it that they should be looking out for, and how do they sort of replicate and evaluate effectively? And then, of course, if you're interested in learning any more about sort of the methodology that we've used to determine the level of rigor for a particular study, that should be in the About section of our website. We're sort of coming to the top of the hour, if not a little bit past it. So with that, I'd really like to thank everyone for joining us today. It was an absolute pleasure to present to all of you, and I hope you learned quite a bit. Dr. Levine, is there anything that you would like to add before I officially sign off?
No, I just want to thank everybody for joining the webinar, and I welcome you all to be in touch with us should you have remaining questions.
Yep, so the slide you have in front of you provides the web address for the site, whatworks.csgjustice.org, so please visit and explore. If you have any questions, think of me as your primary point of contact. Reach out. I'm happy to talk to you about the website. I'd be interested in speaking with many of you about how you can use the site to enhance your programs, agency policies, funding decisions, anything like that. And with that, I think this concludes.
If I could just get one more word in edgewise, and if you have success stories, you who have joined the call, if you would be willing to share us examples of how you've used the site in a way that's been really helpful for you, we'd really welcome those examples as well. And I also want to acknowledge Hannah Dodd, our silent partner. She's on vacation this week, but she's one of our critical researchers. Really, the content is hers more than anyone's in terms of leading the effort to cull through all the research and support our team of coders and reviewers here at the Urban Institute.
Yeah, I would have to agree. She is definitely the driving force of all of that, and without her, I don't think this website would be up and running. So.
Agreed.
So, again, everyone, thank you. Please don't hesitate to reach out to us. I would love to hear those success stories on what you're doing that helps drive the site, it makes it better, and hopefully will ensure the longevity of this effort. After you exit the webinar, a brief survey will appear on the screen. By answering the questions in the survey, you'll be helping us improve on future webinars like this one. We would love if you could take a quick moment to fill that out as well. Finally, within the week, we will email out a link to this recording as well as provide a PDF of the PowerPoint slides. After that, you can visit us at csgjustice.org/NRRC. Thank you very much, and have a great day, everyone.